Welcome to this session. We are really short of time, and therefore I'm not going to give any introduction, but I'm certainly going to share some thoughts after we have heard. So in my concluding remarks, I like to share some of my thoughts. We are going to be discussing at length various issues about economic systems and transformations. And I have some exciting examples to share with you, but all that will come at the end. To begin with, we have Dr. Salim Rehan waiting for us, and he has to go somewhere. So I'm going to start with Dr. Salim, and then we will have uh, Mr. Sabati. He's here with us. And then we have his co-author, George. We'll have him. Then we will have Dr. Ganesh. And then we'll close the panel with Professor Paulo. And then I'll come in. So we are going to be speaking about 5 minutes each. I'm sure you're going to have many questions. Please keep them towards the end. And I'll invite you for some questions. So with that, Dr. Salim, can we go ahead? You have about 5 minutes. Please stay focused and please share the main points with us.
Thank you very much. And I'm very much thankful to the organizers for inviting me to this event and also accommodating my request because I have to actually catch a flight. So that's why I made the request to put me as the first speaker. Thank you very much once again. So when we're talking about this economic systems transformation, I think the first question is what kind of transformation we are actually talking about. In my understanding, we are talking about something productive and some more meaningful transformation. And now coming from a country where Bangladesh and which belongs to the region South Asia, and we know that the kind of discussion what dominates here when it comes to economic transformation, and especially if we want to be very much focused related to structural transformation, economic growth plays a very, very important role, and in this kind of structural transformation in South Asia. But we also witnessed several mixed pictures. Some countries that performed well, made very consistent progress, and some countries they experienced in South Asia, with respect to economic growth, some very uneven path. Sometimes some very good growth, sometimes some years very bad growth. In general, Bangladesh played consistently over the last 2 or 3 decades kind of progress in terms of maintaining a stable and healthy economic growth rate, and it has been less volatile compared to other South Asian countries. Another important issue is when it comes to the structure and the kind of transformation, I think, which is very important about the composition of the economy, and to what extent the diversification has taken place, and to what extent industrialization has taken place in these countries. As I said, I'll be focusing more on South Asia. And when I look at South Asia, I see there are several challenges when it comes to making meaningful and productive diversification of the economy, as well as export diversification, as well as increasing the share of industry, both in GDP and employment in these countries. So all this lead to, as Honorable Chair asked me to be very focused, I'm not really getting into the explanation on that. All this led to, I would say, 3 important issues. And in one of my recent work, I tried to highlight that 3 premature things which happen in South Asia, in most of these countries. And we need to actually get rid of these 3 premature stuff. One is there are signs of premature deindustrialization, especially at a very lower level of per capita GDP. You are witnessing falling employment share in manufacturing, and in some countries even falling share of manufacturing GDP. And we are also witnessing what I call premature declining share of trade in GDP. So that means the falling trade orientation at a very early stage, and which is not very helpful for these countries to integrate with the global value chain and also the regional value chain. And also, I think very importantly, when it comes to this economic transformation, with respect to FDI, I think these countries have not been able to attract larger FDI compared to many of its competitor countries. So all this led to my very last few points is that there are 5 major issues which are really needed when I really want to focus on this meaningful or productive transformation. First, there are many policy-induced challenges. We need to look at those policies, and we need to make right kind of change in the policies. Second, there are many supply-side constraints. especially in the form of weak infrastructure and high cost of doing business. These need to be looked at. Third, the human capital, especially the kind of skill and the human resources, is a serious lag in some of the South Asian countries, and probably most of the South Asian countries compared to, if you compare East and Southeast Asian countries. There are many, the fourth one is the institutional and political economic challenges, especially when it comes to getting the right kind of institutions for this kind of economic transformation. And very finally, when we are talking about this transformation, they need to be sustainable and they need to be green. So we need to very much focus on sustainable and green industrialization. I'll stop here. I think I have taken 5 minutes, and over to you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much. That was really good, keeping time in mind. Let me now move on to Hirad Sabeti. He's the member of the Fourth Sector Group, and he and Professor George are going to tell us more about. So, Dr. Sabeti.
Thank you very much. I've been slightly upgraded. I'm actually not the academic on the panel, but thank you for the introduction. So we're going to, actually, I have some slides I'm going to share. Let's hope this works. Okay. All right, so we were basically asked to do a framing on the relevance of economic systems transformation. I'll say to sustainable development, but really to the goals of the Indian G20 presidency writ large. Sorry, a bit of a slow response here. Okay, so first of all, a quick framing on what we mean by economic systems transformation. If you think about development objectives, by domain, let's say healthcare, this is a framework from our colleague Otto Scharmer, who is an academic at MIT, that sort of explains the relationship between economic systems architecture and objectives, development objectives. So you see here on the right-hand side, the blue columns, we got education, health, farm, and food. Think about those as narrow domains. In development, basically, there are various stages of these things. So we'll take healthcare. The 1.0 version on the left side, you see basically an economic operating system that evolves over time. The 1.0 is input and authority-centric, very dated old legacy architecture. Within the domain of that, or within the capacity of that operating system, we can deliver traditional healthcare, doctor-centric healthcare. And as we go to basically the fourth stage of healthcare, which is thinking about healthcare in a more systems, through a much more systems view, and the interconnection between healthcare and energy and food systems, and all other aspects of the economy. When you think about these issues in a systemic way, you get to the 4.0 layer. And in order for us to achieve a 4.0 approach, a systems approach to various development objectives, we need a 4.0 operating system, which is what the left column is. So basically, as we move towards the SDGs or move towards sustainable development, we need to be investing, further and further down towards the 4.0 layer. But in order for us to be able to do so, the infrastructure for 4.0 needs to exist. That means we've got to invest in building the enabling environment for 4.0 interventions in healthcare and food systems and so on. And only then, and within that fourth row here, is when we can actually have a shot at achieving the SDGs. Because the SDGs are a system. They're not meant to be taken as separate parts. They have interactions on each other, positive and negative. So development finance writ large is trying to and needs to shift down to that fourth layer in order for us to have full alignment between the objectives of development finance and the SDGs. But in order for us to do so, we have to build the economic architecture, on the left side in that 4.0 layer in order to be able to shift development finance to the fourth layer. So I hope that kind of makes sense. I'm rushing through this, but basically we have to go from, we've heard a number of people mention already that we're going from an old to a new paradigm. And the new paradigm is radically different than the old one that got us here. And it requires investing in very, very different infrastructure. So the question is, how do we actually do that? And this is where the fourth sector can play a role. So if you look at most economies around the world, they've evolved to three sector structures: business, government, nonprofits. Business generates the tax revenues that fund government. It generates the philanthropic capital that funds the third sector. So it's basically has outsized influence over how those two other sectors operate. So there's there's outsized influence over policymaking and even over how philanthropy is exercised. So when we think about economic development at the macro level, basically the goal is to grow the private sector. The theory is if we grow the private sector, we create jobs, we promote prosperity, we create quality of life through the products and services that those companies generate, and we generate the tax base that governments need and the philanthropic base that third sector needs to meet our development objectives. That's the theory. The problem with that theory is that the model of growth that we're pursuing, the model of private sector growth, is a legacy architecture, centuries old, based fundamentally on extraction. I don't know if that slide is showing up here or not. Sorry, you're missing my Bloom animation here. Oh well, so there it is. So the old model of growth is basically the more we grow an extractive model of enterprise, right? An extractive model of businesses sees people and planet as resources for value extraction, human resources, natural resources, in order to generate profit and all the prosperity that the private sector generates. That exacerbates the problems that extraction leaves behind. It hollows out the social and natural capital. So we're not going to be able to solve the problems generated by that model of growth, that pattern of growth, by just growing it more so that governments have more money to spend on cleaning up climate change. Climate change is the product, is the output of that growth. Loss of biodiversity, inequality are the outputs of the growth model. So you can't solve them by growing the thing that's causing them. The SDGs cannot be achieved by growing the old paradigm that caused us to come up with the need, for the SDGs. So things need to fundamentally change. The good news is they are changing. If you look at all organizations by their purpose, they fall on a spectrum between those that maximize profit for owners and those that maximize social benefit. So for-profits on the left, nonprofits, government on the right. That's the three-sector structure we're used to in most economies. For decades, what we've seen is this pattern of change where for-profit businesses are broadening their mission to adopt social and environmental values and purposes. We celebrate that. That's a huge movement of movements, and it's been growing every decade. Similarly, if you look at organizations by how they generate their income, they fall between those that earn income and those that rely on contributed income through tax and charity. So for-profits on the left, nonprofits, government on the right. Again, that's the three-sector structure that most economies have. And for decades, we've seen another movement of movements, if you will, more and more nonprofits and governments moving towards market-based approaches to become more effective, efficient, scalable, and so on. So look at these patterns relative to each other. This is basically all organizations humans have created on planet Earth, organized by purpose versus income. In the top left, you've got those that pursue earned income. That means they sell goods and services, and they have their purpose is financial benefit for their owners. That's where the for-profits and the private sector are concentrated. In the bottom right, you got organizations that rely on or contributed income through tax and charity, but they have a social purpose that drives them. That's where nonprofits and government are. That's the three-sector structure. These are the changes we've seen over the past several decades. More and more for-profit businesses broadening their purpose, more and more nonprofits and government increasingly adopting market-based approaches to meet their objectives and scale their impact. At the confluence of these trends, basically, there's a whole new sector of the economy that's been emerging. Sectors, don't fall from the sky. They emerge out of human activity. And for decades, human activity has given rise to lots of new models of organizations, social enterprises, common good corporations, Ubuntu enterprises. There's so many different names and frames people use. Social solidarity economy enterprises, but essentially a whole new flowering of new organizational models that blend the logics of market and mission in various ways. And these hybrids basically are giving rise to a fourth sector of the economy, I won't get into the analysis of what defines its boundaries, but some research has been done on that. At the same time, so organizations exist within ecosystems, the public policy environment, the financial markets, the metrics and standards we use to measure impact. There's a robust ecosystem that's been developing around the fourth sector: impact investing, venture philanthropy, social auditing and assessment, and so on. And governments are passing new laws to recognize new corporate forms, to facilitate investment, and so on. This is actually quite a large phenomenon. You don't see it if you look through the lens of existing law, because it's basically law is lagging. But somewhere on the order of 10% of GDP in the US, in Europe, somewhere on the order of 6% of GDP in the Ibero-American countries would be in the fourth sector. And there's lots of industries where you see a considerable amount of activity: healthcare, journalism, infrastructure, food and agriculture, energy. These are all industries that have the product or service is primarily a public good, and they're delivered through market means. Okay. So lastly, basically, the point here is governments are broadening their perspective now to consider the scaling of all four sectors of the economy, not just traditional private sector focus. And as the fourth sector scales, it basically provides a complement to the other three. And there's basically a big footprint in each of the three sectors that overlaps with the fourth sector. So the pivot basically towards sustainable development is fundamentally a pivot towards fourth sector development. And at another time, I can explain why that is. So I'm going to end it there and pass it on to my colleague, George Moreira de Silva.
Yeah, George, please. George, we would
Thank
have
you.
about 9 minutes, so I hope you will stay within the time.
Thank you. I don't know, Erad, if you can put the slides, or I can share it from here.
I can do that, George.
Thank you. Well, basically based on, and again, many thanks for inviting us. I'm a former director of the OECD Development Directorate and also former Minister on Environment and Energy. And with this project that I've been involved with Erad and colleagues at the Fourth Sector Group, we are trying precisely to address to which extent development cooperation and development finance could foster economic systems transformation. The context is quite relevant. We know that a lot has happened in the last couple of years on development finance global architecture, with the modernization of ODA, with the adoption of a new measurement tool called TOTSTI, with also the South-South cooperation and Triangle cooperation being recognized at the BAPA Plus 40, but also with the emergence of blended finance, impact investment, and the role of the private sector to foster development finance. At the same time, we have seen both ODA and the finance provided by philanthropy raising to the highest level ever in the last 2 years. However, we have also seen that developing countries have been disproportionately affected by the consequences of the global shocks, and also the development finance gap has widened from 2.5 to 3.9 trillion gap. But this is not just about mobilization. We have also seen that unfortunately there is signals of misalignment between development finance and SDGs, and this is quite I would say eloquent when we see what is happening on climate finance, still with a lot of finance being provided to fossil fuels, also the excessive costs on remittances, as well as the little support from blended finance to social sectors and to LDCs, as well as the fact that even with the new trend on sustainable finance, 97% of all new sustainable finance is allocated to high-income countries. So even when we go greener, when we go further on the climate and natural capital agenda, we have seen inequality widening, especially when dealing with access to finance. This is why we thought that the mobilization alone cannot fix the problem, and even the policy coherence and the alignment agenda would require collaboration between philanthropy and governments rather than going through siloed approaches. Based on this, we have developed a concept for a dialogue and support platform. A first meeting was organized already in New York alongside the UN General Assembly with the participation of 12 governments and almost 20 philanthropy. And our basic assumption is we need to address the economic systems transformation through two drivers. First, mobilizing and aligning all finance with SDGs, and second, fostering policy and ecosystem reforms. As Arad said, going from the 1.0 to the 4.0 require finance, but also requires an enabling context through policy reforms. And in this platform, we would be working on capacity building, awareness, knowledge management, but also on the creation of all conditions to learn from each other. Final slide, because I'm running quite fast. What we think would be interesting for this discussion is what could be the role of the G20 presidency from India to foster this economic systems transformation and SDG aligned finance agenda. We think that there is a huge alignment between our concept and the remarkable priorities identified by the presidency from India, and we think that maybe the G20 could highlight the critical need for economic systems transformation to address root causes of the interlocking crisis, recognizing the emerging role of the fourth sector of the economy, precisely as a drive to drive economic systems transformation, also recognizing that both SDG aligned finance and economic systems transformation would need to pair and to be synergetic. We also think that the G20 could call for a structural dialogue between philanthropy and governments on this agenda, economic systems transformation and SDG aligned finance. And finally, we think that the development of a fourth sector development index would be a breakthrough, and obviously we would be very happy in assisting you on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, you both, Barrett. I think Sabati and George, you are introducing the fourth sector in the GDP computation. That's a very innovative thinking and a new thinking. Of course, you have been working on it for some time now. So I read your paper in detail, and he's the CEO of the fourth sector group. So thank you very much. Let me move on to now Professor Ganesh. He is former Director, School of Economics, Devi Ahilya Vishwavidyalaya, Indore, India. Yes.
Thank you so much, respected Chairperson, sir, learned panelists on this economic system transformation, and dear delegates. I am really thankful to the organizers and especially Professor Sachin Chaturvedi for making me part of G20 Think discussion. We all know that economic system is very important if you look into the macro perspective, and without proper transformation of economic system, it is almost difficult to achieve the set target of 17 sustainable development goals or climate or environmental issue. So if you go through the little history of industrial revolution, you will find that capitalist system was emerged to harness the benefits of the industrial revolution. And that started first in the UK through a steam engine, and then the development of textile industries. Then it spread it for mechanization in the agriculture, in the iron ore industry, or still all over US. Then through internet, there is a enhancement of the degree of automation, and that spreaded all over Europe, East Asian countries, and even the third world countries. And now we are in the fourth industrial revolution, which is digitalization, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and many other areas. And I think all countries are affected by these type of revolutions or invention. Not only the countries, but all the part of the social life or the society is influenced by this type of revolution. But what is the real issue? The real issue that all these industrial revolutions focus on optimization of growth, optimization of production. And efficiency is measured in terms of the productivity of capital. Sometimes efficiency was measured in terms of productivity of labor, but there was no regulatory mechanism to control the other environmental or climate issue. As a result, there is a overexploitation of natural resources, there is a exploitation of labor, and there is a enhanced gap between the rural areas and urban areas. And even the US government, in order to take the benefit of mechanization, use the protective trade practices and charge heavy tariff on steel in order to promote their steel industry. But this helped in the enhancement of their infrastructure and increase the size of their income. But because of the gap between the rural areas and urban areas, because of the gap between the workers working with the industries and working with the agriculture, there is the unrest among the labor. And because of the unrest among the labor, there is a movement of the labor, and because of that, new economic system emerged, known as socialism. But unfortunately, because of the technological revolution, it has enhanced the productivity of all, more in the developed countries, but even the third world countries took a lot of benefit of this advancement of technology, and as a result, the socialistic movement or the communist movement could not sustain. So now there are issues, and what the issues are? The social issues of economic development, environmental issues of economic development, food and energy issues, and dominance in supply chain by some of the countries or some of the companies, and then the emergence of the issues related to pandemic. All that has created a huge problem on the achievement of the sustainable development goals, or to save the environmental issue. And the other very important, because the industrial revolution was emerged at the time when there was no regulator, effective regulators. But now today we are working in a very effective regulator mechanism. But unfortunately, because of the subprime crisis in 2008 and 9, the developed countries are now moving towards deglobalization. And we know that the climate change and the pandemic issues, they are the negative externalities of economic development. Since they are the negative externalities of the economic development, therefore, if you are not having a proper regulatory mechanism, it will be very difficult to help the third world countries from the climate change or environmental issues. If you go through the data on the Trade Openness Index, you will find that the Trade Openness Index has decreased from 55 to 44 for all countries. But for developed countries, it has reduced from 53 to 39. So means the practice of the developed world is more deglobalized, and they want to de-link from all. The UK example is the best example, of the globalization. So now the issue is how to make that economic system which is accountable to all these global issues like sustainable development goals, climate change, environmental issues, and for that the best model which we have experienced from our research near Indore and the Malwa area of Madhya Pradesh, which in the morning session our CM has focused on, and that is people's participation. If you are able to motivate the participation of the people, you will be able to achieve this one. And Indore is a wonderful example of cleanest city. And if you will go through the data on that, the Indore one, when Pradhan Mantri ji launched the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, the first ranking of Indore was Indore was ranked as 149. And then within 3 years, it jumped to first in 2017. And since then, it is maintaining the first position of cleanest city. And not only the first position of the cleanest city, but is earning huge money from the processing of the garbage. What they are converting? They are converting garbage into CNG gas, and from CNG gas they are running around 150 city buses moving in the Indore and earning a revenue of rupees 14.45 crores from CNG gases, and from sale of carbon credit he is getting 8.5 lakhs rupees, and then premium from the big industrial houses or the hotels for collection of the garbage 2.45 crores. So, and then completely managing the show. And what they did, they completely involved the participation of the people in collection, processing, and motivating the colonies, personal colonies, and they are converting their garbage into the biomasses, and they are using for their garden, water, and so on. The other example which the CM referred was the rainwater harvesting. All farmers, they are storing the rainwater on their farm, using that water in the off-rain season and increasing the agricultural production. And you will surprise that you are coming from the Punjab. The Punjab was experiencing this experience in 70s. Now Madhya Pradesh, farmers of Madhya Pradesh are taking 4 crops in a year, 4 crops. But economic system is not able to digest that huge agricultural production. As a result, there is an unrest among the farmers. So we have to make economic system which is accountable to all these issues. Otherwise, it will be difficult to maintain or to maintain the G20 slogan, that is one earth, one family, one future. It's impossible. So just through technological advancement, and now we have artificial intelligence or the digitalization. So we have to expand in order to reach to the bottom of the society. Otherwise, it will be difficult to improve the quality of life of these persons. Thank you, sir.
Really thankful for everybody maintaining their time. Punjab example of 4 crops excites me, also hurts me in the sense, pains me, because what happened to their soil in 30 years and what happened to their water table is extremely, and that has not been studied enough. And therefore the fear is that Punjab soil could be desertifying, and the quality of soil because of the fertilizers is so bad. There's life below the soil which enriches the soil has totally been lost. So that's in case there are lessons to be learned, and I wish somebody documents those lessons of Punjab experiment pitfalls so that states like Madhya Pradesh can quickly learn lessons and not go the whole way. Thank you for your thoughts. With this, I move on to the last speaker for this panel, and that is Professor Paulo, who is from Institute of International Relations, Brazil. Looking forward to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for having me in this section. The debate about, and I could say the imperative of transforming economic systems is the product of a multiple crisis: health or pandemic, climate, and food security. This crisis did not create, but certainly contributed to deepening what is perhaps the primary product of our economic system: inequalities. Just to reiterate, I'm always every time I come to Delhi, I'm reminded that I look like a representative from civil society than more like civil society than the think tank. But just to reiterate some data about inequalities, let's remember the report that was released by Oxfam last year. This report says that today, 262 million children will not go to schools. Almost 10,000 people will die because they cannot access health care. And 16.4 hours of unpaid care work will be done, the majority by women in poverty. So this scenario of profound inequalities was in a way deepened by the various crises that we are living in, but it was not created by them. These crises have in common an economic system which, as we discussed in the morning, has the market as its center. However, just to focus on the three problems mentioned, health, climate, and food security, we are dealing with issues that cannot be considered that can be considered as negative externalities. For example, the carbon emitted by consumption or production of a particular good or service is a so-called externality. Or a public good like health or a stable climate or even food security necessarily imply non-rivalry and non-excludability. Central characteristics of goods and services exchanged within markets. Not by chance, the three problems could be treated under the umbrella of market failures. I love this name. But our challenges may lie exactly there. Over the past 30 years, we have built an economy on national and international scales, not only marked by market hypertrophy, the erosion of national states and the public sphere in general, and finally, the financialization of all transactions. Of course, the international system followed those paths, and the so-called global public goods became a missing link within the international development landscape. And this became quite clear during the pandemic. And this is the point I want to address, our incapacity to address the problem of global public goods. During the pandemic, it became quite clear the lack of coordination among nation states, the incapacity of the international organizations and the international regimes that were built to fight or to deal with situations like the pandemic. The concentration of resources, I'm not talking only about vaccines, but I'm talking about the product or the good that creates the vaccines, knowledge. All the knowledge is actually concentrated in few countries, and the concentration of capacities. While we assisted, and this became clear within the G20, while we assisted many countries inserting billions and billions of dollars in their own economies, what we saw in middle-income countries was the lack of fiscal space, leaving the majority of the population without any kind of protection, because the states did not have the resources to sustain social distancing and so on, non-sanitary measures or sanitary measures for that matter. So the inequality in terms of fiscal spaces and in terms of how these spaces or how the debt is actually considered is another feature of the international system. The portrait of the catastrophe was the debate in Paris, and this was outrageous, in Paris 2022, about the ways the donations of vaccines, those vaccines quite close to the expiration date, they were sent to Africa, and in Africa they were not used because they were close to the expiration dates, and they could not be delivered to the people. So the donors were discussing how they should report the vaccines as ODA. This was the heated, probably the heated debate within the DAC last year. The establishment, the big success in terms of fighting the pandemic was the establishment, thanks to the government of Indonesia, mostly of the FIF, the fund to fight pandemic, or for the preparedness to fight pandemic. It was launched in the last G20 summit in Bali, and the expectation is that the fund would gather $10 billion. The results were 1.5, $1.6 billion, less than 15% or less than 20% of the expected or necessary funds to do some, or to create some impact. What seems to be clear is the fact that IFIs are still operating to enable or to reinforce domestic and international markets. This is not different though when it comes to ODA, and I'm finishing, Chair, I know I'm running out of time. ODA is mainly delivered via bilateral channels with no particular concern, only as a donor choice about the provision of global public goods. When delivered via multilateral institutions, ODA is mobilized as earmarked contributions, so under the discretion of the donor as well. ODA produces and reproduces a divide between donor and the recipient countries that creates, first, a legitimacy gap with regards to its allocation. And second, keeps the middle-income countries where the problems related to global public goods provisions are strongly manifested, not only without support, because they cannot receive ODA anymore, but without responsibilities. These countries are being treated as they have no responsibility in terms of the provision of global public goods as well. And I think the G20 is precisely the place to discuss this. Once, and we are discussing this since the morning, the G20 may be treated as a G7 plus 11 middle-income countries, which should be responsible for the provision of global public goods, but should also benefit from the funds that should be made available by every country in the world. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We are running badly out of time, and we have Professor Lukovi Seke, quantitative economist and R&D and innovation indicator specialist at ODA, NEPAD, South Africa. So,
thank you very much indeed for, thank you indeed for allowing me to
requesting you to be please brief, about 5 to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you indeed for allowing me to speak today. I'm going to share my presentation. I'm going to take you through quickly the way we understand the importance of industrial transformation based on the economic system transformation. So it's very basic for some of us economists because we cannot take it for granted. Some in the venue are not economists, but we just need to make sure that we understand for us as a household, for us to consume, we need to have an income. And then also when it's come to other agents like firms, they also need to make sure that they combine labor, raw material, and the physical capital. And the current knowledge-based economy in which we are living require to empower people who are working because knowledge is now driving everything we are doing, and that can even be seen in one of the model of production function. So this is just a basic way of using the constant elasticity substitution production function. So in the past, we were just considering that knowledge was not really more important. It was neutral, could not influence. But with time, we discovered that we cannot just use capital and labor the way it has been in the past. So now that's something that has been very neutral and considered as a parameter is now dominating in our age. So when we check the flow for us to have our GDP, we can even understand the importance of having all the actors in the system. And when we go through the changes we observe in terms of production, we are seeing now we are fitting in the fourth industrial revolution. And for us to really give an update on each stage, we can see the coal in 1765, gas in 1870, we can see electronic and nuclear in 1969. And nowadays we are talking in terms of Internet of Things, and not only that, all the emerging technology, even renewable energy. And when we see the way this fourth industrial revolution is appearing, we cannot really demarcate ourselves from the youth, because those are the people who are understanding the technology. We are becoming even outdated, some of us. We find our kids using the smartphone and sometimes showing us something we cannot understand. Even the brain is accommodated to the development of technology. So we really, and even when it comes to health, we have precision medicine. When it comes to agriculture, we have precision agriculture is showing us where we are going. And then when we check the type of economic system, we understand where everything was traditional. We have government intervening all the time, and we have the sociality where they feel everyone should be okay, and we should not allow private to own the business because they can abuse. And we also understand those who believe to the invisible hand, that let everyone at least make some benefits, because at the end of the day, if all of us we can be happy, then the entire society will be happy. So I cannot really reinvent the wheel, as I was saying, to avoid just assuming that everyone is an economist. So we understand our traditional way of doing things, where we have barter, and the government is very authoritarian, and also where we have the market, the capitalist one, and that is happening in most of our economy. But the issue of vaccine raised before is showing us now there is no more transparency and humanity in capitalism. We can see most of the world, they can be bombing, and those who are selling, let's say, pharmaceutical product is becoming like a mafia in bracket. I'm saying without undermining the effort of most of our pharmaceutical fellow and firms. They're doing a very good job. But when it comes to the fact that capitalism is not longer having the heart, then it becomes a serious problem, because even the current presidency of India, handling G20, they are putting everything under one future, one family, one health. Because if we cannot do that, then we have diversified and very conflicting interests. So the issue of fitting ourselves in the mixed economic system is more contextual, and that could be the way to go. But still, we need to have the human art on that. And as I was saying, indeed, in the past, we were not having currency. People could just exchange what they were having as good. But now we are also seeing this happening in terms of the currency, because if I need the US dollar and I have one, or I have money from China, so what will happen is we should find a value. So what we're having in the past in terms of product is happening today in terms of money. So, and I will just keep all those things because I already covered them in terms of the transformation system in economics. So, and now let's see what I was talking about. We check the trend of barter, gold, metal coins, paper money, plastic card, electronic money, cryptocurrency. And behind this, we have people who are working. So there should be...
Lukavi, we are running out of time. You should close now.
Yes, and what is happening on the continent in Africa? We believe that for us to accelerate industrialization, we need to focus on entrepreneurship, we need to focus on health issues, climate change, and all those aspects you can see there. And we are working now with the European Union. We believe that to work together and to achieve the same goal toward Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030, we should really focus on more investing in research and innovation. And we will see that some of the countries are really making it in terms of what they're investing in terms of R&D. So on the continent, we are very keen to be supporting India through the presidency, because we believe that if we cannot focus more on research and innovation as we are talking now, so we cannot make it. So under Sustainable Development Goal 9.5, we have that responsibility to make sure that we are able to measure what we are managing. Because if you cannot measure that, then there is a problem. Thank you very much indeed for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we had to rush through because of paucity of time. I want to thank all the panelists. Before we close, I just want to share two thoughts with you. And I would also like to invite the second panel on industrial transformation to please be ready and come on the stage. Before I close this panel, I would like to share one thought. It was around 2012, I was working at the IMF as an economist, senior economist, and had a chance to interact with the EDs of various countries over there in various regions. I had never, and I was already around 49 years by that time, and I never realized what sustainable development is, which is running throughout the panel today, here and even in the morning. So no names. This is the ED from one of the OPEC countries and leading OPEC countries. And I told him, why do you do this with the POL, with petroleum products? Why don't you just bring it out? And so that you ease the situation, energy situation in the world. And he said, look, Dr. Singh, this oil which is under my soil is not my property. I have received it by virtue of past 100 generations. And this is a property of the next 100 generations. Who am I to just drain it and share it with the world? I had never thought of sustainable development in terms of intergenerational transfer of resources. Most of the time when we think about sustainability, we think about something the past year, the current year, and the next year, or maybe 10 years past now and the next 10 years. But there are people, economists in the country and policymakers in the world who have started thinking of intergenerational transfer of resources when we speak about sustainable development. And I think that needs to be preserved. And did we, in our quest for industrialization, forget that? And 300 years, which is just about 10 generations, we have brought the planet to a situation where it can explode. So I think we all need to think about it. Professor Ganesh, thank you for the examples that you gave, but I must share with you a very beautiful story. I was in Nagpur about 5 years back, a professor at IIM Bangalore, and doing a study. And the people at Nagpur were telling me, like the Amul model, they are collecting garbage and they think garbage is the new gold. And they're making good amount of employment and good amount of money by recycling that. And they said, people do not understand, but garbage has sometimes gold in it, really gold, not just the metaphorical gold, but real gold in it. By the way, most of the electronic goods do have traces of gold there. So the point I'm trying to make is the new paradigm which is emerging, the search for a new growth model which is emerging needs to be taken very seriously. So Professor, I want to thank both of you, and I also want to thank Mr. Sabeti, correcting myself, Mr. Saveti, for the thought that you have brought in on the fourth sector. Thank you very much. I would now like to invite the next panel on the stage. This is the panel on industrial transformation, and we have Professor Saikat Sinha, Professor Dr. V.K. Malhotra, Professor Ram Singh from Delhi School, and we have Atami from Timor-Leste. He's going to be online. I can see he's there. And Dr. Pankaj Vashisht from RIS. So I'd invite all of you please on the stage. Because we're running badly out of time, I'm going to use this time while people are settling in. I'm going to share a few more thoughts with you. And I would like you to please ponder over it. When we are talking of industrialization and we are speaking about industrial transformation, I would like you to remember two things. One is, when industrial revolution took place, what was the thought? Keep your culture, your ethics, your values outside my factory. Just come in, you will be given directions by my manager, produce it like a robo, and then you leave. We give you your salary and wages for just following our instructions and believing our instructions. By virtue of that, so much has transformed the world that the industrial revolutions that have come in, and some of it we were listening from the last speaker, Lakovi, we're listening, the industrial revolution that set in was devoid of many ethical values. The second thing I would like to share is something that happened with the General Motors. If you have read the story about the combustion engine, when it was discovered, there was a complete public transport system very well laid out in America. And when that combustion engine could be made smaller and fitted on a car or a bus, you should see what happened in America. The rail lines that were already there, they were dismantled, they were removed, they were buried so that nobody else could use it. And the public transport system was totally destroyed. The cars, the trucks, and the buses were brought in to replace them. And the combustion engine and the pollution that it would create would be massive. The results of all that is now for the planet to witness. So therefore, I always believe that industrial revolution in about 200 to 300 years has brought this devastation and severe carbon footprint. So we need to think about it. I'm very fortunate and I want to thank RIS, the G20, T20 team, and Professor Sachin Chaturvedi to give me this opportunity to interact and chair this session. In this session, we have speakers, and so we have 6 speakers, and so we'll have to ration our time a little carefully. We want to close by 5:25. That leaves us with about 45 minutes now, and I won't speak much, but we have 6 speakers other than me. So given that we have to close in about 44 minutes, can I request everybody to please contain your thoughts, share them in 6 to 7 minutes. At 7th minute, I'll probably just remind you that we are running in short of time. So the sequence I'm going to follow is Professor Saikat Sinha, right? And then we'll go to Professor Malhotra. Then we go to Professor Ram Singh. Then we have Dr. George. And then we have Mr. Itami. He's joined us online. And we have then Dr. Vashisht here, Pankaj Vashisht with me. So we have the 6 speakers here with me. So I'm going to start with Professor Saikat, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really happy that Sachin invited me to this important conference and important session because myself and Sachin, we have a long history of growing up together in RIS. From where Sachin stayed back, I have moved out 18 years back. And I happen to know the chair, though the chair might not remember me. We used to stay next door to each other at the Center for Development Studies, Trivandrum. So, and the rest of the panel. So thank you very much to be in. Now, structural change or industrial transformation or structural change in industries or industrial transformation as we generally define, it's a move or a change or a shift from low productivity to high productivity sectors. Resources like labor and capital are likely to move to more and more productive sectors. This is often known as industrial bonus hypothesis, but this, unfortunately, this has not happened in many of the developing countries. Why I highlight on the developing countries, because if you look at the G20, the developed countries are there, but there's a large group of developing and emerging market economies, and this has not happened in the emerging market economies or the developing countries during the process of industrial development. I insist on the word process, because industrial development to me does not happen overnight. It's a process that comes about. Now, with that, output has grown, and despite fluctuations and shocks, the recent ones, as you know, the pandemic being the most recent one, but the Verdun's law has not actually worked in many of the countries. The Verdun's law has not worked in many of the countries. Productivity, and for instance in India, productivity has not grown in proportion to the output growth in industries. So this is the setting, and in this setting, I would like to highlight a couple of points that I thought would be important. I might not be highlighting on the points which the chair initially remarked on, but I will highlight on certain other important points which I thought should be highlighted. The question is whether the transformation, the industrial transformation that has happened in these emerging market economies have led these emerging market economies to participate in the global value chain or not. And for the industries to participate in the global value chain, the important thing that first comes to mind is the kind of technological transformation that is being required for such industrial transformation. And why I say this, because I started defining structural change or industrial transformation in terms of a move from low productivity to high productivity industries, and productivity across some G20 countries, especially in East Asia, were widespread across industries until till the pandemic broke, which proved the Gersten-Cronian notion of catch-up, where productivity increased or the increase in productivity depended negatively on the distance from the global technology frontier. The industries which are closer to the global technology frontier, they actually had higher productivity growth than the industries which are far off from the global productivity technology frontier, and hence there was a divide that was created between industries, the low productivity industries and the high productivity industries. This technology factor, as you would realize, is important, and one important dimension in that technology factor is the Industry 4.0. Now, with different levels of development across G20 countries, they're likely to have differential impact on each of the industries. They are likely to have differential impact on each of the industries, and they are likely to have differential impact across the G20 countries. So it's not restricted to a country alone, or it is not restricted to an industry alone, but you have to take both the dimensions, the industry by the country, and then you have to see in totality what is the impact of Industry 4.0 on productivity across countries. Now, two challenges that come in the way are when you have Industry 4.0, and similar will be the case of green technology. Similar, the case for green technology will be no different, and the countries would face two challenges. One, one is with respect to the scalar structure of the industry. In most developing countries and emerging market economies, there is a missing middle. That means the middle has petered out, and there is a bipolar distribution of industries across the G20 countries. One at the lower end of the spectrum, the scalar spectrum, the other is at the higher end of the scalar spectrum. And the growth necessarily happens at the two ends of the scalar spectrum. It's the very large industries which tend to grow very fast, and in most developing countries, including India, and many other emerging market economies, there is large growth which has got concentrated in the small and medium. I would not say the medium, the smaller industries, the industries which have small scale. Now, and also importantly, post-industry 4.0 and the drive for digitization, there is lack. You would see that at the higher end of the spectrum, larger industries have got more used to actually imbibing the new technology, whereas the ones which are at the lower end of the spectrum, they have not been able to catch up. So what it creates a scalar divide. The scalar divide gets perpetuated, and this is one thing which is very important, which I thought that should be flagged and should be brought forth. The other important dimension is with regards to infrastructure, apart from the digital infrastructure, and everyone has been talking about the infrastructure since the morning. I believe other speakers in the panel would also speak about the importance of infrastructure which can lead to industrial transformation. And I know Ram Singh is an expert in that area. He will definitely speak on infrastructure. Why I bring about the polarization of the two sets of industrial scalar groups, one at the lower end of the spectrum and one at the higher end of the spectrum, is that the process of industrial change and transformation till now and can possibly after
badly out of time.
Possibly after industry 4.0, inequality in scale and wage is likely to perpetuate, and this is despite the SDG 10. This needs urgent attention along with industrial attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to Dr. V.K. Malhotra, Professor, Department of Economics, Chaudhry Charan Singh University, and we all know him from ICSSR, where he has contributed significantly in promoting research across universities in our country. In his short stint, he has helped extremely well in raising the quality of research, funding the institutions, and India's ranking in global ranking. So we must thank him for that. Professor Malhotra, please.
Thank you, Chair, Professor Charan Singh, who happens to be a good friend also. And we have been sharing our concerns quite often, in fact. And I'm not an industry person, and I requested Professor Chaturvedi also that I should be in some other session, in fact, in place of industry. But he said that from your experience of funding researches, looking at the reports also, I think you could suit any of these sessions. There are some general remarks. I'm not trying to add right now evidence behind my comments or remarks, but there'll be certain theoretical issues and challenges before G20 when they talk about industrial transformation, or as I look at the industrial transformation myself. One, I'll say it in the form of certain observations, in fact. I personally feel that the paradigm of development, which model should be working, for long we have been thinking that one size fit all model is working for all countries. But we have come to this realization in the recent past, maybe last 15, 20 years, that it's a economic fallacy, in fact, that one model fitting all economies is working well. There are own models of the country. When we talk about out-of-box model also, there are a number of countries which are setting their own examples. In the middle of COVID-19 pandemic, when Prime Minister once again talked about Atmanirbhar Bharat, that is self-reliant India, while maintaining a good degree of globalization and global connect also, I think he was talking about the model where the local resources, where local capacities are made best use of. Second major issue that I think all G20 nations and the whole world is right now confronted with is the paradigm of profit maximization. Theoretically speaking, the view on profit maximization has always been seen along with cost minimization. But I look at the whole situation a little differently, because this profit maximization paradigm perhaps has not helped industry all over the world. And I take instance from India in meeting their corporate social responsibility in a very, very effective manner. We know when we talk of protectionism, and we have been classically talking in terms of with Professor Charan Singh on few occasions, I did discuss this issue of center-periphery relationships. So world has definitely witnessed increasing declining trade openness. An index which a year back stood at 55.45%, declined to 44.8% in 2020. The noticeable fact is that the index for the developed countries has declined far more than the index for the developing countries. You call it their constraints, or you call it the freedom to move, in fact, from openness index. I think that's a very, very significant thing, that this index in the context of developed countries has declined from 53% to 39% in 2020. So that establishes us that given a sudden change in the situation, whether developed economies or developing economies, they're all bound to turn protectionist in certain ways. And I think that issue would definitely need attention of all of us. Thirdly, the global trade, 50% of the global trade is covered by GVC and technology intensive trade separately. I think there is a great degree of scope in this, because if developing countries, they need to definitely give a fairer part or contribute a fairer part in the global value chain, then this 50% has to rise to phenomenal levels, in fact, in days to come. Fourthly, there are difficulties, and there are real difficulties with regard to market access and distributive outcomes of trade. Why I'm saying it all, and my friend, Dr. Saket, did talk in terms of Industry 4.0, I slightly look at the things a little differently. There has come a time, because just now I talked about even developed economies turning protectionist. In fact, Industry 4.0, when we talk about that, I think developing economies do not find themselves, and in India's case, especially Industry 4.0 became an example of early steaming, as we see industry share in the whole economy is stagnating over a long range. We cannot say it one odd year that this was happening. It has been, to me right now, it appears until very, let's say, revolutionary reform measures are taken, industry's share in the GDP appears to have stagnated around 24 to 26%, in fact. And when I talk about industry or look at Industry 4.0, I'm compelled to think in terms of MSMEs also, which contribute nearly 30% of GDP, which comprise of 6.3 crore units, provide 111 million jobs, contribute to the extent of 50% in India's exports, and have 37 to 40% share in total manufacturing. So looking at this scenario, in fact, this macroeconomic scenario of industry, Industry 4.0, in my view, perhaps could not be a reality. Right. So, and if at all it had to become a reality, I think the whole scenario of MSME in Indian context could have been seen along with the startup culture and the kind of technology, the kind of cost cutting, the kind of economic process that they introduce in the process of overall manufacturing. So what I'm trying to suggest is that industry, technology, and in concept note of this conference, I think one point that we are missing, and we were discussing at lunch, me and Professor Ramsingh, industry, technology, and employment at G20 platform, they need to be discussed together, in fact, because I said that protectionism has meant different things at different intervals of time. We have been talking about liberalization and globalization again in different contexts. And whenever we make a beginning, we start with capital liberalization or outflow of capital as a major tool of liberalization. I'll just sum it up. Right. So I think there are issues when we talk of liberalization or globalization, capital, technology, and flow of human resources. They again need to be talked together. And when we talk about them, I think directly or indirectly we'll be talking about the employment issues also. We are all aware that apart from Industry 4.0, there is a deep science wave which is said to be Industry 5.0. And there are areas of future are the areas of future collaborations also. This is, I think, can be a point of beginning, whether we talk of biopharmaceuticals, health, education, automobile. So all these industries, I think they are leading us. I remember there used to be a term like smart products and small processes, which was being talked about under Industry 4.0. And AI, hyper connectedness, and data analysis, they became part and parcel of all those things. I'm sure that actionable insights and plans are going to work for the whole world. And we understand this reality more than we ever used to understand, that entire world could turn to be protectionist in the time of crisis. So if we are creating opportunities in the world, we would take into account these crisis situations and how situations have turned also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Malhotra. Let's move on to Professor Ramsingh now.
Dr. Singh, thank you. I'm going to build on the ideas articulated by my colleagues on this panel, Professor Malhotra and Professor Roy. So I'm going to build on the idea of productivity, role of productivity and infrastructure, and also whether one model or one size, one model fits all economies or not, and relationship, importance of employment when we think of industrial transformation, industrial revolution. Now, I would like to bring to attention of our foreign. So India has been a non-typical country when it comes to developmental path. You know, we talk a lot about China's unusual growth path, but Indian growth path has been equally unusual. The traditional economic wisdom is that an economy transforms itself from an agrarian, agriculture sector dominated economy to the one that is dominated by industrial, and then subsequently service sector comes to dominate. Our growth trajectory has been different. We directly changed ourselves from an agriculture dominated economy to service sector dominated economy. If anything, the share of industry in the GDP has been declining consistently. During last few years also, the share of industry industrial sector has come down from 16 to little over 14%. So all these trend paths, may beg questions. Why Indian path has been like this? What has been the role of conventional wisdom? Or do we need to revisit conventional economic wisdom when we think of the developmental path? Going back to the traditional wisdom, the primary drivers of industrialization and development path would be infrastructure, where infrastructure will be physical infrastructure and also legal and regulatory infrastructure. There is a lot that can be said in national, in Indian and other countries' context that that physical infrastructure actually is a driver of growth path, industrialization. But there's much more to the growth path. Let me give you one example. So Indian markets in different product lines have substantial Chinese presence. The Chinese goods are there in many product lines. But they also deal with same infrastructure that Indian goods have to. So an Indian manufacturer located in Bhopal has to shift her goods to port. But then Chinese exporters also have to do just the opposite, meaning thereby they're dealing with same infrastructure and yet have come to dominate Indian markets. This shows that there's more than infrastructure that is at work. And what is that is the other thing that Dr. Roy talked about, which is the role of technology, a role of productivity. It's on the productivity frontier that we seem to be lacking significantly. And that's where we need to put our heads, and the development economies also needed to do that. The productivities, other than infrastructure, the other drivers would be the technology. And we have been doing pretty well on FDI front. Therefore, we should be having access to the fairly advanced production technology in the world. But we lack in one thing which is very important, that is the skill set. Our workforce lacks in the skill set. And that, in my view, is responsible why we have not, our industrial sector has not grown to the extent it should have. We would like it to grow. Now, what could be the responses to in such unusual situation? When it comes to physical infrastructure, things have changed drastically during last 5-6 years. So the landscape, infrastructure, road, railway, net, civil aviation landscape of this country across the length and breadth of the country has changed significantly. It has transformed. 11 industrial corridors are going to be, Chinese equivalent to special economic zones. Self-sufficient, providing all sorts of infrastructure, connecting hinterland to ports. It should take care of this. The other remarkable thing that has happened, and that should also facilitate industrial development, is that our regulatory, contractual and regulatory infrastructure also has improved by way of insolvency and bankruptcy codes enactment. So on this count, we hope that the industrial growth will happen along expected lines. But we are not going to get where we need to get at. And the reason is twofold. One is going back to the issue of skill set, that our workforce lacks skill. The other is that the heterogeneity, while heterogeneity is our diversity and heterogeneities are our strength, it also comes at some expenses. Out of 3 factors of production, 2 factors of productions are controlled by provinces, Indian states, namely land and labor. Both state governments have significant control over these factors of production, and to that extent, because of slow progress on these 2 factors of production, Indian industry has remained small on an average. Indian firm size is much small compared to international standards. Again, going back to traditional economic wisdom, we would want our industry to grow. But I think we should take dual path. How much time? 2-3 minutes? So in some sectors, we can afford our industry to grow in size. The examples would be electronics and IT. So we are, as Indians, we always, envied Japanese-made products, Korean-made handsets. But days are not distant when we will see India-made handsets, where India will account for at least 1/4 of handsets made in the world, and other electronic goods. The special category chemicals is also other product line where we can excel, because we have fairly decent quality and low cost workforce that is needed to specialize in special category chemicals. Automobile sector is another sector where we are acquiring expertise. And we can also plan ahead and meet our supply side. For example, we are expanding big times in renewable energy, in winds and solar energy. But those equipments used in harvesting wind and solar energy should be made, can be made. There are ample economies of scale scopes that are available for us to build those equipments in India. All this is very good. It will reduce our import dependence. It will also increase our footprints in international export market, but they are not going to take care of the challenge that Professor Malhotra mentioned, which is the employment. All these sectors are technology-driven sectors, and we can't hope that even if we excel at international level, they will take care of 1.5 minutes. They will take care of unemployment challenge that we face. For that, I feel that something that is derided by economists as micro and small enterprises are looked down upon as low productivity enterprises. We need to take a relook. We need to live with some idea of inefficiency, because the low, micro and small enterprises are employment intensive enterprises. They are good supplement to good supplement to big industries, but on their own, they have enough product lines that promote exports and also that take care of local demands that are centric to Madhya Pradesh, that are centric to Tamil Nadu. They can be better catered through. We don't need big industries for that. Micro and small enterprises should be encouraged. And I would like here to if you ask me, Dr. Singh, as a chair of this session, what is one Indian idea that should be driving our industrial policy? I would say it is a Gandhian idea. Under Gandhian vision, the technology should be, or the guiding principle to adopt technology should be to identify areas where labor cannot meet the demand. In those areas, we should make gradual switch to technology, labor replacing technologies. But we should not bring growth at the expense of employment. We should not promote entities and policies where we end up promoting labor-saving, adoption of labor-saving technologies. With these thoughts, I conclude.
I totally agree with you, Professor Ram. We cannot lose sight of employment. And that is why I totally agree with you even on emphasizing MSMEs. At least we keep condemning them, but they are the ones who are keeping people engaged. And I've seen this experiment in Punjab where you give money to people under doles, or you give them a very easy minimum support price of agriculture products. You enrich the farmers. What will they do? They will either go for drugs or for weapons. That's why Gandhi clearly said, let them earn their bread. Don't give them dole. So I'm totally with you. MSMEs need to be supported, and whatever industrialization, it cannot lose sight of employment. In a young demographic country like India, applying artificial intelligence or machine learning and saying keep people redundant, you and me have traveled abroad enough. They do not have people. So therefore, automation and automatic cars and self-driven cars is something. But in this country, there's a queue of people waiting to do things. So I really thank you for placing those ideas on the table. We are running out of time, and I wish we had lots of time. Now we are moving on to Professor from Mexico, Professor George, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Chaturvedi and RIS for the invitation to this meeting. And I think we are in the same channel. I will retake in certain way points that my colleagues in the panel have mentioned. Let me to start with a couple of comments. India was in the headlines at the end of the last year. You might have remembered a couple of news. The first one, when it was announced that the world will reach 8 million inhabitants for this year, where India will surpass China as the most populated country. The second, it was announced as well that Apple will move part of the production of iPhone 14 to China, from China to India. So in such context, allow me to raise 5 points to be considered for the G20 presidency around challenges and opportunities in industrial transformation. 3 of them related with what Europe is doing currently in that line, and in certain way that the rest of countries can learn or implement in certain way. And of course, linked to the SDG 12 directly, but indirectly to the rest of the SDGs. And allow me as well to quote Ambassador Chinoy this morning, focusing these ideas through a virtuous cycle of development, looking for scalable solutions for development. Point one, or first point, no matter the advancement of technology, Industry 4.0 that was mentioned before, and I appreciate the conceptualization of the Professor Saikat around what means industrial transformation. No matter all those advancements or artificial intelligence, robotics, or digitalization, the news that I mentioned at the beginning shows that it is clear that labor-intensive countries and economies like India, as labor-intensive industries, are still relevant, no matter these advancements. And the global governance needs to take into account this for global development. Second, in 2023, maybe you are aware as well, there will be enforced a new European law on the topic of due diligence for European companies or big companies that will have to report impacts on human rights and environment along their global value chain. So that is a challenge, particularly for companies in emerging countries, in low-income countries, and a reason to be aware of the implications and the relevance of such regulations. We can say that behind is the time where some initiatives were voluntary, like corporate social responsibility, and now we face a sort of regulation or norms that are compulsory. Third point, the need to plan beyond the 2030 agenda, unless we still have some years to finish this agenda. I think it's important to plan in a better way the industrial transformation for the following years. One of these first examples comes from Europe with the European Green Deal that you might have heard as well, that look to support technological shift on areas as climate, energy, infrastructure, or transport in the following decades, as part, as you know, of the current pandemic. So in this period, all the countries face the lockdown and the implications for many companies. So we need to recover the economy, the SMEs, and all the companies. So these kind of measures could be relevant for everybody in the context of the G20. The fourth point has to do with, in a similar way, with the next generation's European Union Recovery Plan that is aligned with the previous one, that is looking for a more green and more digital and health and strong economy and industry as well, with a similar strategy, trying to think in the long term to provide support to middle-income companies and to small companies and enterprises. The private sector in general is relevant for all these countries. And lastly, there is another emerging topic that has to do with the so-called voluntary sustainability standards, and that has many implications for private sector as well, and for producers and consumers beyond trade, impacting as well global value chain. Again, all countries like India and mostly emerging countries should be aware of the relevance and implications of such standards beyond the 2030 agenda, to see how they can reconvert the companies or how they can adapt those standards without harming local companies and without generating more unemployment or affecting the local economies. So those are my key suggestions, and I hope they will be relevant for the work you are doing in different spaces on the G20 and T20 work. Thank you, Chair.
Professor, thank you very much for keeping the time. We are on to Mr. Atami from Timor-Leste. He's online. And Mr. Atami, can we request you to be brief and restrict yourselves to maximum 5 minutes? So just share the highlights with us.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I would like to thank Professor Chaturvedi and RIS for invitation to be at this distinguished panel. I will actually just have one point. I think, as the chair mentioned in the beginning, with the reference to the moral side of the industrial transformation, that the whole notion of the industrial transformation comes with a lot of baggage. It has been happening in some countries for centuries, and we associate the process with certain issues. And I would like to invite everyone, and I think that this is extremely important when we talk about the industrial transformation now, to look at some of the countries that have their industries at their infancy. And I refer, of course, to the LDCs and the small island development states that essentially, because of their size, they were not able to develop the viable industrial activities in the past. Stage in their development. Of course, their geographical isolation, the small size, it translates into the lack of economies of scale, very high cost to integrate into the value chains into the international markets. There are some small island states that leapfrog from agriculture-based to services-based economies. At the same time, also see that this is the strategy in their economies. And Timor-Leste, where I'm currently based, is one of such examples. The country's economy now depends on the hydrocarbons. It has large oil and gas reserves, and obviously it tried for some time to add value to those resources. Well, now in the recent period, it changed the strategy towards the classical combination of special economic zones, promotion of entrepreneurship. Today, for instance, there was the Digital Timor strategy was launched. So the big question is whether such countries would be able to be successful in realizing their ambitions. And as I said, sometimes they don't have the choice. Right now, the youth unemployment is at all-time high since independence, and this industry would not be able to bring about this employment. And the medium and small enterprises that some of the speakers already mentioned could be the only locomotive of employment and development. In the interest of time, I would pass to the conclusion, basically to say that I really wanted to commend the government of Indonesia for introducing the focus on the small island development states and the LDCs in the context of G20 presidency. And I think that the slogan of Indonesian presidency, "Recover Together, Recover Stronger," highlights this interdependence between different types of countries. I think that the fact that we have this discussion shows that there's very significant unfinished business in this area, and I hope to see sort of the attention to various aspects of industrial transformation, including transfer of technology, support to human resources, support to the policy space and the institutions that are required to the modern industries, as well as the special programs targeting the small island development states and the LDCs in the context of the Indian presidency in the G20 over the coming year. So I would like to end by saying that I think that the small island development states as well as the LDCs are the natural allies when it comes to promoting this important concept of lifestyle for environment that Indian presidency put in the center. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Atabi. That's very kind of you, keeping time in mind. Now we have the last speaker for the day, and it is 5:22, and he happens to be from the host institution, RIS. So I'm sure we are in his control. So Dr. Pankaj, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And I come from Haryana, and there is something called, there are two words, Baratis and Gharatis. So I am Gharati. So it's my responsibility that the marriage things goes on time. So I will not be taking much of a time. And actually, my other speaker panelists have made my life but bit easy, because they have said most of the things what I wanted to say. So I had planned to talk about the digital transformation and its challenges. And some of these issues has been covered. So I want to highlight only 2-3 things. So we know that the digital transformation is on us, and it is actually transforming our industry. And it is actually, digital technology is offering a lot of opportunities. But there are challenges, there are risks, and there are costs involved. And the biggest challenge is how to harness these digital technologies for the larger benefit. And this is a challenge because given the variation in the capacity of different individual, different organization and different region, if we don't have and do not design the appropriate policy, there is a risk that the digital technology will lead to the higher concentration of wealth and income. So there has been a discussion about digital MSME. So I just want to give you some figure. We are currently involved in a project on MSME digitization, though we will have our results in some time, but so far our interactions suggest that only a minuscule proportion of MSMEs have actually adopted to the digitization, and their presence on the online platform is very limited. And when we talk to these people, they say that the biggest problem is their management, top management, they don't have skill or information to identify the digital solution. Second, obviously, we have been thinking about this, hearing about this financial gap. Again, it's a problem for adopting the digital solution, and the infrastructure deficit. Connectivity becomes a very serious issue the moment we move out of the metros. Now, second layer where technology can have a significant impact on the distribution is through the labor market. And we all have heard about this whole debate about the future of job. And there the debate starts from the end of work to the changing nature of job. Now, the end of work hypothesis, actually nobody takes it that serious because given our history, we have seen that the three industrial revolution has not led to the increase in structural unemployment, but there has been a subtle change in the nature of job. So in academic term, the task content of job has been changing. So there is something called de-routinization of job, and it started in Europe, America, starting mid 80s or early 90s. So I did a paper 2 years back, and I estimated the task content of jobs for India. And if you look at the figure for US and India, you'll find a lot of similarity. The only difference is we are not heading towards complete de-routinization. So it means the routine cognitive jobs are still holding. But the moment we switch to the distinction between organized and unorganized, the organized sector actually resembles exactly to the developed country. There is a complete de-routinization. And the more worrisome trend which I want to highlight with you is, I estimated the task content of different social group. And there you find that the task content of socially underprivileged sections, SC, STs, females, the routine task content of their job is very high. So they are at higher risk of automation. So in near future, we have to plan our policy in keeping in mind that the impending change is going to hurt the socially weaker sections more. So we need to have policies which are well thought of, focusing on the skilling and reskilling with special emphasis on female and socially underprivileged section, and then the issue of infrastructure to make sure that the technology is accessible to everyone, to make sure that everyone gains from this. So with this, I would like to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is very good, Pankaj, what you have mentioned. I was a great fan of digitalization, and I wanted brick and mortar branches of the banks to vanish because we said we are technologically very advanced. We have the jam trinity with us. Everybody has a mobile phone. And then when we did surveys in our branches, we realized there's a segment of society which wants to come to the branch. And they want to come and spend time. They want to speak to the clerks. They want to speak to the manager. And these are generally people above 60 years. So therefore, blind digitalization and blind application of technology, probably in a country like ours, which respects the elderly, may not be possible. The second thing, as you mentioned, there are certain segment of the society, we also feel Automation may do very well and digitization may do very well in the metropolitans, but in the second and third, especially the fourth and fifth tier cities, we need brick and mortar branches. We need people to be there and get familiar with. And that's why when they recently came out with branches which are high tech and telling how to go high tech and digital things, while we also participated in it, we realized we'll not be able to universalize it. We will have to go in a disaggregated pattern, suits some and may not suit others. So I think this panel has been a very rich panel. There's been contribution coming from all types of speakers here. Professor Malhotra, who specially said he's not an industry man, but turned out that he gave some very good examples for us to ponder upon. And then, of course, academic experts as well as survey-based results. So I want to once again thank RIS and Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi and the G20 and T20 team that gave us an opportunity to meet and the panel that you see here to share our thoughts with all of you. Thank you very much.